Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. This is episode 121, When Magic Happens with Chanticleer. There have been a few instances on the show over the 3.5 years that I've done it where I have truly been starstruck and fanboying, as the kids would say these days, and this is definitely one of those. I have been a Chanticleer fan ever since puberty probably, when I was in a boys' choir. I've been listening to and watching Chanticleer videos. I mean, this is the choral mountaintop here, you guys. And I got to sit down live in person on location with the entire group. This is a dream come true, an episode that I think will go down as one of the most fun that I've ever gotten a chance to do. Because, first of all, I love the in-person episodes. That's like a big deal for me, to be able to just look face-to-face to people and actually have conversations, especially after the pandemic, to get to have that experience again. Plus, when I do in-person episodes, I find that the video versions are more engaging and more interesting because you actually get to kind of be a fly on the wall and be an observer of the body language. So I encourage you to head over to the YouTube channel and subscribe if you have not already, and check this one out in video form as well. This episode is a special first. I have never gone on location to meet an entire ensemble for a conversation before, and let me tell you, it was worth the gear haul to Lawrence, Kansas. Grammy Award-winning ensemble Chanticleer was at the Lead Center in Kansas for a performance and masterclass at KU, and was able to squeeze some time in for you, the Choralosophy audience. The 12 men of Chanticleer and I had a fast-paced roundtable discussion about what it's like to be at the choral mountaintop in the ensemble, about the vocal gymnastics of countertenors, the unique space that the group occupies somewhere between choir and chamber ensemble, as well as their thoughts about what it takes to truly create magical performances and magical moments as they're making music together. I think you're going to find this conversation not only helpful and thoughtful and insightful, but entertaining as the group bounces ideas around the circle in a way that was truly authentic and lots of fun. So we've done something big over at Patreon, and we've finally cracked over 150 members. That community just continues to grow, and I'm blown away by the support financially in order to continue to underwrite the costs of the web hosting, the advertising, the equipment, all the things that continue to be monthly expenses for creating the show. The Patreon really makes sure that those don't make it cost prohibitive for me to continue to provide these great conversations and professional development for you for free. So head over to patreon.com/choralosophy, and for as little as $3 a month, you can jump in over there and be part of that growing tribe of supporters. The producers at Patreon are Brannigan Lawrence, Brian Long, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, John Warner, Ulrich at Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Angie Schilling, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Jared Hendricks, Jeff Walsh, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Nathan Hines, Ryan Main, and Steve and Kathy Kakachik. As always, just a reminder to use your promo code Choralosophy at checkout when you use Sight Reading Factory membership upgrades, as well as adding student memberships. Whenever you go to mymusicfolders.com to order folders or singer's masks or any other classroom supplies that you need, they have a great stash of things that you can use for your classroom, and you can get a discount there as well. And then, of course, sheet music from ryanmain.com and graphitepublishing.com. All of those websites will give you a discount whenever you enter Choralosophy, so make sure that is part of your habit when you're shopping. Hey, are we at 12?
We are at 12. We are 12.
Whoa. Look at us. Okay, gentlemen. Hi, I'm Chris.
Hi, Chris.
I'm excited to be here with you guys. This is has to be probably a first ever in choral music to have an entire group like this on a podcast, because there aren't very many choir podcasts. Right? So I can pretty confidently say that. I'm really excited to be here. This is the Choralosophy Podcast, and we are going to just get a chance to have maybe a behind the scenes into what it's like to be in Chanticleer. I'm going to get a chance to meet you guys. The audience will get a chance to meet you guys. Of course, I got a chance to watch you with the KU Glee Club just a second ago, and you kind of got a warm-up session with some questions. So we're probably going to talk about a lot of those same types of things, which is going to be really interesting for people, because I know people my age and older even grew up watching Chanticleer and listening to Chanticleer, and of course this is a legacy that I'm sure you guys are fully aware of how big of a deal it is for choir nerds to think about Chanticleer and to listen to Chanticleer. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys. So the first thing let's do is let's just introduce everybody. So we'll go around, and I appreciate your name tags because that'll help me later when I might call on someone. But let's just go around maybe to my left and share your name And since we have so many of us, let's do like I guess you could say a truncated origin story. Where do you come from, and what was your kind of direct path to Chanticleer leading you to this point? So maybe education, where you come from in the world geographically, and we'll start off to my left.
All right. My name is Andy Berry. I am a bass who was born just outside of Washington, D.C. in the Bethesda, Maryland area. I studied psychology and neuroscience in college and always thought I was going to be some kind of professional medical person, lawyer person, but just loved singing so much, singing a cappella and in choir. I got my master's in voice in opera performance at the Yale School of Music, spent some years as a freelance opera singer with the Pittsburgh Opera and Santa Fe Opera, etc. And then I auditioned for Chanticleer, and the rest is history.
Awesome. Oh, and let's also say how many seasons, years we've been in the group. That might give people some context.
This is my 5th season singing with the ensemble.
Awesome.
I am Jared Pagankoff. I'm originally from a farm in northeast Wisconsin. I had a very rural upbringing, so I didn't have a whole lot of outside school opportunities when I was growing up, but I always knew I wanted to be a music teacher. So I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison to study a music education and found out while I was there that I actually liked singing more than I liked teaching. So I decided to pursue a master's degree in vocal performance, which I received from the University of Houston. I did several years as a freelance singer in Houston, and then I moved to Boston, where I was trying to specialize as an early music singer. As being a countertenor, that's one route that a lot of us take. And then I got a call from Chanticleer that said they had a last-minute opening, and would I be willing to move across the country and join? And so I did, and I am now in my 8th season with the ensemble.
Awesome. Awesome.
Hello, my name is Cortez Mitchell. I have been in the group for 16 seasons. I come from Detroit, Michigan. I studied at Morgan State University in mathematics and voice, and then I did a master's at Cincinnati Conservatory. Right after school, I went to Minnesota Opera as a young artist there. And in 2004, while I was an undergrad, I heard about Chanticleer. So I'm making up for lost time. That's why I've been in this group 16 years. Because I didn't know Chanticleer. I finally heard them in 2005 at Cincinnati Conservatory, and was like, yes, I need to be in this group. It worked out, and I'm still here.
That's awesome.
Hello, my name is Zachary Burgess. I am from the Washington, D.C. area as well, but south of the Potomac and from McLean, Virginia. I have a Bachelor of Music from the Boston Conservatory and a Master of Music from the Eastman School of Music, where I majored in voice at both institutions. And I was introduced to Chanticleer while I was at Boston Conservatory as a freshman. I was in a music history class. Victoria's Omnium Mysterium was one of the listening quizzes, and I was listening to all these different groups sing this, because I said, I have to know this piece inside out if it's on there, that 30-second clip. And that's how I discovered Chanticleer. I've been following the ensemble ever since and fell in love with it. And as soon as I graduated and moved back to DC, I was gigging in DC, working retail at Apple, and heard about auditions at Chanticleer, and flew out in 2016 to audition and got a call about a year and a half later about an opening being there, and this is now my 6th season.
Awesome.
Hi there, my name is Andy Van Allsburg. I'm a tenor from Holland, Michigan. This is my 7th season in Chanticleer, and I got into singing late in high school. So late, in fact, that I started college as a percussionist and switched to a voice major halfway through my freshman year. Thought I wanted to be a teacher, absolutely, and studied music education. But as I went through college, I fell more and more in love with performance, and I studied classical voice, but also jazz and musical theater, and had a knack for a more contemporary style of singing, so I had connections to cruise ships through my jazz program, and started my career singing on cruise ships in an a cappella quartet. Then moved to New York City, did a bunch of auditions, sang with production companies, and a little more cruise ship work, did some stuff, music directing, and had a friend in the group in Chanticleer at the time that I was in my last season at Radio City Music Hall with the Christmas Spectacular, who invited me to the Christmas show, and realized maybe I can do this whole Chanticleer thing. So I sent in some materials, and thank God it worked out.
That's awesome. Very cool.
My name is Corey Reed. This is my 11th season singing with Chanticleer. I am from Napa, California, the Wine Valley, of course. And I was exposed to Chanticleer in 8th grade when my brother put a CD on. It was Magnificat CD. And I was just blown away by the countertenors. And I told him, I said, I need to be in this group. I need to figure out how to do this. So I went through my whole high school choral experience, which was a wonderful choral program, 350 plus students. And I just fell in love with it. I went to a youth choral festival in San Francisco that Chanticleer hosted, and my choir was invited to come. I heard Shenandoah live. I started crying. I still was like, oh my gosh, I need to be in this group. So I went the music ed route just to secure a job if I couldn't perform. And after my undergrad, I was looking for a high school job, and that's when the recession hit in 2008, 2009, and they were laying off a lot of those arts, humanities, and music teachers. So I went back to school, and then my friend said, hey, you can try out for that. And at that time, I was like, no, I need to figure some stuff out. I don't know if I should do these. Just throw a tape out. So I did, and got called back, knowing there wasn't a spot open, and sure enough, 6 months later, I got the college job.
Awesome. Very cool.
Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Ward. This is my 17th year in Chanticleer. I'm from, grew up on a little dirt road that was off of the bigger dirt road just south of Tecumseh, Oklahoma, where I was really into Janie Freaky, and then subsequently Patsy Cline. I would sing their songs with the turkey baster in front of the fireplace, and I was Janie Freaky. I skipped out of town at about age 17. I finished high school in Windsor, Connecticut, and that is when I realized I wanted to go to music conservatory, so I went to Manhattan School of Music, majoring in French horn. I got to study at the Royal College of Music. I then went to Yale School of Music, also studying horn, and it was really there I began to do a lot of singing with all of the, opportunities there are to sing at Yale. And I met the amazing Ian Howell there, who was the first countertenor I'd ever met, and discovered myself that I liked singing countertenor. And so one thing led to the other, and I was in the middle of a DMA program after I graduated from Yale at Stony Brook University, and Joe Jennings called me and said, hey, we want you to come out and sing. So I dropped everything, including my French horn, and came out and joined the choir.
That's awesome.
What's good, friends? My name is Logan Shields. I'm born and raised in a tiny town called Three Rivers, Michigan. Always loved singing ever since I was a child. Didn't get into choral music until my junior year of high school when I auditioned for the advanced choir and got slid in spite of not having music reading chops, but immediately realized how obsessed I was with harmony, close harmony, and with voices. Ended up going to college for music, vocal performance as a tenor, which I'm singing countertenor now. Studied for a little while and left college, my first school, Western, transferred to another school, tried out Grand Valley State, singing tenor, same thing. Turns out I really love music, but don't really love school. So ended up joining the craft beer industry and working in craft beer for a few years until one of my good friends that was in Chanticleer, Blake Morgan, he knew I had falsetto chops as a countertenor. And he's like, maybe you should submit something. So I did, and I got a call back. There wasn't an opening, unfortunately, but I guess I left enough of an impression that when someone decided to leave, they called me and offered me the job. And so I am now in my 7th season singing the top notes in Chanticleer.
Awesome.
Hello, my name is Vinil Garissa Mahal. I was raised in Houston, Texas, and that is sort of where I developed a really big love for singing because of the choral music scene in Houston. I went to Southern Methodist University for undergrad, and it was there that I actually started playing around with singing as a countertenor. Spoiler alert, I'm not a countertenor, I'm not special, I'm just a regular old tenor. I afterwards, after having a bit of a vocal crisis, tried to find myself at University of North Texas, where I did my grad school, and I did a related field in early music, really developed a love for that, and then decided I loved school so much that I actually went to New York University after that to do their postgraduate advanced certificate in vocal pedagogy. And I came to know of Chanticleer through high school. I was one day just a little sad because I was in high school, I guess, as one is wont to do. And I searched up Chanticleer because I had heard a contact, I'll specify, Mr. Quaid, Eddie Quaid, who I love dearly, suggested that I listen to Chanticleer. And boy, did Chanticleer lift my spirits up so much that I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful, a dream to sing with them. And then after some freelancing and after some teaching and some performing, I found myself auditioning, and now here I am.
I'm Bradley Sharp. This is my second year singing countertenor in the group. And I came to singing a little bit later on, my senior year of high school. It was because I had friends in choir and I had an open spot in my schedule. And they had heard me sing a little bit. They were like, "You should join." And so I, tried out. And up until that point, I had always planned on, not always, but for the years before, I had planned on being an engineer. And decided my senior year that I was going to major in music and leave all that behind. So I went to Cal State Fullerton and got a performance degree. And then after that, went to the Yale Institute of Sacred Music for my master's, which is kind of where I got more into Chanticleer and just learned about Chanticleer and thought that would be a really good path for me to take, especially just because, we all know that music can be unstable at times, and this is one of the very few stable positions, and I thought that it was I really thought that it was a good fit for me, so I auditioned twice and got in my second time. So.
Hi, my name is Matthew Mazzola. This is my 6th year singing tenor. I'm also from Houston, Texas. I was born and raised in Houston. I went to University of Houston for music education. And that's kind of where I developed my love for choral singing. I've always been a choral person. I never did much the opera or early music even. I just loved singing with other people. But I got a music education degree, and I taught elementary school for a year. And then I took a year off and sang as much as I could in Houston, choral stuff, and then landed here.
Cool. Hi, hope you're still with us. Thanks for sticking around. My name is Matthew Nickman, but the better Matthew is Matthew Mazzola. This is my 12th season singing baritone. I started singing as a young boy in the Episcopal Church in the Men and Boys Choir Anglican tradition. And so I sang soprano, I sang alto, then I sang male alto, then I sang tenor, then I sang baritone. And it was very lamentable having my high notes disappear week by week. But I landed where I landed, and I discovered Chanticleer as a senior in high school through my music choir director. He gave me their CD, Wondrous Love, and I just fell in love with them. I just said, that's what I need to do with my life. And so I went to Westminster Choir College for my bachelor's and my master's. I also auditioned multiple times, like Bradley. I auditioned 3 times, and finally got the call. If you all had ever seen the movie The Pursuit of Happiness, at the end of the movie, when Will Smith gets that letter or that call from the finance firm, and his reaction and the way and everything he feels in that moment is how I felt. When I watched that movie, I thought, I know how you feel, Mr. Smith. And it was a beautiful moment in my life.
That's awesome. So this next question I'm going to open up, we don't have to go in order, just anybody who wants to talk about this. So I'm interested in, and I think any Chanticleer fan would also be interested in, what is it like to be in Chanticleer? And I don't just mean like the obvious things that you would talk about in a big group, but like, what's it like to be on the road with the same people all the time? There are challenges. There are also probably really fun things. Just the idea of the things we would not see on the Chanticleer Instagram. How would you respond to that question? What is it like to be in the group?
Well, maybe we could start by saying that we have to thank our predecessors in the group from the early 90s,
Oh,
because
yes.
that's when they went full-time and established the nonprofit organization.
Mm-hmm.
And they decided as a group to actually take a cut in pay to have a better life on tour. So because of those gentlemen, we now have our own hotel rooms on tour that we can have our solace, have our solace and escape to when we need to.
Mm-hmm.
We have a per diem on tour that covers our food expenses. And we have a beautiful singer policy that protects us as singers. It protects our voices, so we can't do 100 concerts in a row. It's a max of a certain amount, and other things on tour, have to have a certain amount of time to sleep before we do another event the next day. So we can really thank those brothers in Chanticleer that came before us for our better life on tour, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, anybody else? What's it like to be in the group?
Well, it's an incredible privilege. It's something that so few choral singers get the chance to experience. Just the amount of concerts that we do is, I find it incredible, because we learn music and we don't just get like 3 or 4 shots at it. We can, at Christmas we get like 35 chances to, make it something, in our touring program we'll get 70 or 80 or 90 chances to get some of this rep, super solid. And that's the blessing that I find in it, is just the amount of singing we get to do. I even love rehearsing. It's, because we get to rehearse a lot too, which is an incredible gift for a group to have the time to rehearse. And the kind of the depth that we go into music making in rehearsal is pretty satisfying, in that we can, we just talk about the pickiest things, because really all of us are at such a level that we come into a rehearsal and it's, even if it's not perfect, we know what our deficits are and how to make music the right way, mostly. But what we get to do in rehearsal is just some incredible work that I don't think many groups have the time really to get.
So in a lot of ways, you get to dive all the way, or peel, I should say, all the way to the inside layer of the onion with all the choral music that you do, and a lot of us mere mortals do not get to do that. I'm glad you mentioned that. Just the idea that you get to do a program 35 times, for example. I lead a pro choir here in Kansas City, and it's the kind where we rehearse 12 to 13 hours, and we do the concert once or twice, and we never do that repertoire ever again. And I know exactly that. As soon as you said that, I was like, oh my God. Because there's always things left hanging on the table. And even though they're really, excellent musicians, there's always, could we have just done that one more time, and we could have made magic out of it. And that's really, I'm glad you mentioned that.
I will say, piggybacking off of that though, in our sound checks, we're still tweaking. We're still in the pursuit of that perfection that doesn't exist. And in a way, perhaps to some people that may be infuriating. But I think that is perhaps the biggest beauty, is that we get to experience this process together. That it isn't about this far off goal. It's about being the best that we can be. And that is so inspiring. I have learned so much from each and every one of these people. I can say that because I'm the new kid on the block, so I'm actually not sure if I specified this is my first season with Chanticleer. And truly, I can name each and every one of these people and say something that I've learned from them. It is such a blessing.
That's great.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when you're in school, you got textbooks, you got teachers that all have their own, schools of thought and opinions, and it's sometimes you learn. I don't know who's listening to this. It's funny. Sometimes you learn, in school. Yes, you learn a lot from your professors, but you equally, if not more, learn from your colleagues that you are constantly with in rehearsal and in choral methods classes and music history, choral literature, etc., etc. And that's the unique thing about Chanticleer is, I agree with Vanille, you know, during rehearsal process, you might have the best sort of opinion or the way something should go interpretation-wise, and you come in and you're like, no, this is how it should be, and you hear some other, just really, you're enlightened by other people with their just wonderful brain, you know, and all the different like sort of ways in which, you know, you can approach a piece of music, and you're just kind of put in your place, like, that's a great, yes, that's what we have to do. And so that's, for me, I mean, I've always liked school, I've always loved academia. I don't like the deadlines and being told what to do, but I love the atmosphere, and for me, Chanticleer is sort of that continuing education of still being in school and learning from each other. So that's one of my favorite things about this group.
Actually brings up another question that I was going to talk about later, since you mentioned it. So the idea of collaboration within the rehearsal. What is the philosophy in the group now? Because I know there's been experimentation over the years with like a guest artistic director, for example. Is there artistic direction officially, or is it totally collaborative? How are you guys doing that right now? Anybody can...
We do have an artistic director, Tim Keeler, and he does a lot of the programming and a lot of the rehearsal process, but it is a very, very, very collaborative experience. He's great about, you know, just sitting back and letting us talk or give our insights, because he is also very aware that he doesn't know everything. None of us know everything. So some of us are real jazz heads, and so when there's a jazz piece, they'll kind of take the reins and be like, maybe we could do this and whatever. But it's really collaborative, and we all really want to hear each other's voices.
If your school or church are in the market for staging products like risers, shells, podiums, movable platforms, all of the things that you need to set your choir up for success, I would like to strongly urge you to check out StageRight. StageRight's products are sturdy, they're durable, they're easy to use. I have personal experience with the acoustical shells and some of the platforms that they have at StageRight, and I can tell you, compared to some of the more expensive competitors, they are a really great option to fit inside of a tight school budget, but also to give you the durability and usability that you need. So check out StageRight at stageright.com. So how does that work in the rehearsal? So Tim's there, I'm assuming not conducting, because it's not a conducted ensemble. So he just sits and listens and gives comments? How does that describe that, how that works?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. I mean, when we are first picking up a piece, if it's a particularly cantankerous piece with lots of interchanges and stuff like that, Tim will, you know, it's not unheard of for him to conduct us. But ultimately, his goal is to get us to a place where we can be on stage and be completely self-sufficient. So it is a lot of like, who are you going to look at for that? Who's going to lead this, and how are you going to do that? And you know, somebody in the middle of the arc might say, that's not clear, we need to figure out a way to make this clear for everybody. And so Tim, in that case, is very much like an arbitrator. He has to handle all of these personalities that are very collaborative and are very opinionated. But ultimately, he's the one that says, we're going to do it this way. I really want it to be this way. No, you have to do it this way. I don't want it to be the other way. But, you know, and then at a certain point, he has to back away and let us figure out how to do it without him. And sometimes that's a really difficult, I think it's more difficult for him than it is for us, because I don't think he likes to see us struggle with anything. We never struggle with anything, but but he wants to get in there and help to fix it. And sometimes we just need to say, no, you need to let us figure out how to do it ourselves. So we're still trying to get him to understand that, because he likes to, you know, screw the nuts and bolts a little bit tighter. But yeah, he's with us very much at the beginning stage, and then slowly, as we become more familiar with the piece, he steps away and we take more ownership of it.
Like an interesting layer on top of that is we stand in different formations for different pieces for different reasons, and that means somebody different is going to be on the end for every couple pieces or so. And so you have to learn how that person expresses that piece of music, or how they'll do a gesture, because we each do it differently. So you have to kind of learn that person's like musical habit, like physical musical habit, or give feedback if you want something more, maybe something's too less, or something's too confusing, too much moving around. And that's been something, especially like when we started working on music for this season, that I was paying so much more attention to, because I just thought, well, I never thought about that interpretation or taking this breath or this pickup. And, you know, that's stuff that Tim kind of helps us with, but we have to really learn on our own as we're getting something up on its feet to take up on the road.
Mm-hmm. Such an interesting dynamic, again, to think about like how most choral musicians interact with a director and what you guys get to do. It's almost like, I can't think of analogies for it because it's super unique. I teach high school choir, and so in a lot of ways that is what I'm wanting my students to do, but oftentimes there will be 60 of them, and you just can't. And so you have to like have that hierarchy all the time. But I always dream that like, what if I could just set the kids loose to like just solve all their musical problems, right? But that's such a neat opportunity.
Yeah, I think I've been in Chanticleer for a long time, and this is one thing that I think, we were still kind of like, well, how do we maneuver, like, the fact that we're not really a choir, we're not really, we are, and we're also a chamber group, so we need some direction, but we also need to be collaborative, and we also need to be self-sufficient, but it's like, we kind of exist with 12 people. It's a little, sometimes can be a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And, so it's, over the years, it's just like, that's kind of the one thing that is sort of the thing that we kind of have to like, always, in every piece we rehearse, kind of get around, like, the sort of existing between the choral and the chamber aspect of music making. And, but I mean, I think it makes it interesting, fascinating, and challenging. So I wouldn't change a thing, really.
A distinct issue of being an unconducted ensemble is that you have to talk in advance about a lot of decisions that a conductor can make in the moment or communicate in the moment of performance. And so there is a certain freedom to being unconducted, maybe, but there is also some way where you have to agree on a lot in advance about tempo, especially. My God, you should hear of how much time we can spend just trying to talk about how fast a certain section should go and how many attempts it takes us to make certain tempo transitions that having one central figure to literally conduct would solve. And instead we have to really carefully dissect moments of transition or alteration, retard, tempo change, because as much as we want there to be a free, like extemporaneous music making, you kind of can't do that with 12 people at the same time in the context of a live performance. There's some wiggle room, but there's actually quite a lot that you have to really sort of over-discuss beforehand.
Yeah. And we can over-discuss it too much.
That's why you need the director in the room.
I mean, sometimes it's important to say, okay, we're going to take an eighth off of this note for a breath. And sometimes it's important not to say that, I think, and to, we had tried different things with, different leadership, like, how we maneuver retardandos, like, are we, like, put it in another meter or something, and like, but I think now we're finding that sweet spot of sort of knowing when it's important to be technical, but also knowing when it's okay to just make music.
Mm-hmm. I think singing conductorless is also a lot where the chamber music side of this whole thing comes together. I mean, singing without a conductor not only puts more ownership of the music on us as the singers, as the music makers, but it also removes the fourth wall a bit of the conductor, where everybody's looking just at one person, and we can then connect more with each other and more with the audience. Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's the audience who's paying to come and see us. It's this music that we get to share with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that it's the idea of, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, when you said the idea that sometimes you have to talk about this is a release on an eighth note, and sometimes it's better to not just talk about it, because sometimes we get, like, there is that magic in the moment where we just all felt it together. Like, we felt it exactly but as soon as we notate it, it becomes a thing we count, and then it changes, right? Well, is that kind of what you meant, or?
Yeah, I think just in some instances, we can be a little too picky and sort of overthink stuff sometimes, which you know, maybe it'll be together on stage, but it's not going to be magic.
Right.
Yeah. But also, having said that, you can't just expect magic to happen on stage.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually, it brings up an interesting maybe conversation point that we could divert to, is how do we define that? Like, for those of us who, or for those of you guys who have been in the group for a while especially, like, if you think back through your years of Chanticleer, I hope, at least, you could think of like some magical moments in either rehearsal or performance. And what does it take to get to that point? Is that a personal thing? Is that something that you feel in a collective way? Or feel free to share stories about things that you felt were pretty special.
I think it's similar to when you're trying to prepare yourself as a soloist. And when you're young, you're building your technique. And technique is the foundation of everything. And once you've gotten that and you've dissected everything, how you're going to approach passaggio, how are you going to do a mezzo voce, how are you going to use formen, all these different things. Then when you're singing La Traviata, or you're singing Mason Bates, doesn't matter who you're singing, you let it all go. Because it has become so ingrained in you and so natural that you don't have to think about how to navigate the top note. It just comes and you have that liberating feeling of flying. And that's equivalent to what we do, as we were just talking about in the rehearsal space, that we do talk things to death because that then allows us to let go in the moment and not be so obsessed with being together, or you can't see what I'm doing over the radio, but or making sure it's quote unquote right. Because there's nothing really right in music, I believe. It's the emotional connection to the piece of music. A lot of times when I love technique and I love watching someone just kill it, like Lang Lang's playing the piano. It's like, oh my God, your technique is amazing. But I think for every human being, at the end of the day, what they take away from performance is something that's moved them emotionally, and it's something that has sort of adapted and evolved their life in a moment's notice, in a twinkling of an eye, in an Augenblick. So I think that's a way of creating, I don't want to say defining, but creating that magic that's possible.
For me, a lot of the magic comes from audience members, personally. It's really easy when we sing a piece for the 100th time to kind of somewhat disassociate from what we're singing about. And that's very important for us to remember. And it's much easier for me to remember when I look out and I see an audience member smiling or crying or really kind of leaning forward and really excited about what we're doing, because that reminds me of why I'm doing this. Because I love to sing, but I could sing anywhere and do whatever, but I love to sing for people.
Anybody else have
magic? It helps when the chords are really in tune, and it helps, of course, but I like to think of it as like a plant or something. Every show in a space with an audience, kind of bouncing off of Matt Mazzola here. It's like you're pruning and tending to the energy in a room and in a space, between the energy between each other, emotionally, the energy between each other, musically, and then also through that fourth wall, which kind of doesn't exist. It doesn't exist with us in a way, and with the audience, what they're experiencing emotionally, but what they're also experiencing audibly. It's like a perfect hand in hand. You can give all of the emotion you want, and if the technical things are just lacking, it can lack, and then vice versa. It could be pitch perfect, but if there's no feeling, then what is it? And so it's I always just think of pruning a small bush or something. You're trying to read the room, read what you can, and pick it up in either area to make it a better experience overall.
Yeah, that makes me think of, I don't know if any of you are familiar in the circle with an article that was written 7 or 8 years ago by Peter Phillips over in London, talking about, he was lambasted for this, but basically kind of went off on the London professional choral scene in just that way, in that I can grab singers from all over the city and they can show up and they can sing the exact right notes the first time, all the time, but I cannot get them to make a facial expression. and it was part of I think what he was getting at essentially was that in that ecosystem of professional choral singing, that's what they're being paid for. It's that is the mentality. It's I sing these notes at this time. You want more? You'll have to maybe pay more. I don't know. But it's just part of the idea. And so what are some of our thoughts maybe about? I think that Matthew number 2 here said earlier, just where all that technique work is just let go, and in a lot of ways, though, we can't do it. We can't let it go unless we've got the technique, right? And so, is that something that you kind of have to deal with in a group like this as with your own personal voice, or is it something that you ever talk to each other about? Do you have to communicate verbally about, hey, we need to emote more? Like, I don't see anything on your face. Do you talk to each other about that?
Maybe Andy Berry would like to tackle this one.
Oh, well, I am one of the people in this group whose kind of personal obsession tends to be about story or acting or whatever, but as I was hearing you describe that issue, to me it is something about our luxury of time that we were talking about earlier, where for so many people, the hierarchy of making music starts with notes and rhythm and whatnot, and because of the nature of choral project work everywhere in the world, not just London, if you're getting a gig choir together, the director probably only thinks they have enough time to do the stuff that is quote-unquote music. Mm-hmm. And so there is some element of the fact that we have so much time to think about this music, and especially after a performance, during a performance, looking around and maybe seeing your colleagues kind of with giving you that 100-yard stare or whatever, then at the next sound check saying, hey, how about this song? Like, what do we need to talk about to revitalize that or bring some new life to that? I feel like especially toward the end of a touring program, we make extra time to sort of re-spark or rekindle our story interest in various pieces that maybe we have started to disassociate from a little bit or go on autopilot from a little bit because it's so far deep into the year.
I don't think it's really the London gig scene's fault, actually. I think it's a culture shift for choral music in general, because most of us, myself included, some of us grew up in choir, and you just go sing your music in rehearsal for those 2 hours, and you go home. And now you think that's what it's supposed to do, and you don't really think about, I could pick, especially in today's modern age where Google and YouTube and Spotify and all this literature and information is at your fingertips, where you can just go home and research Christopher Fox composer. You can research Meeting Here Tonight that's performed by Contus or something, and it allows you that opportunity. But we just have to sort of shift that culture change for all choral musicians. Said practicing is not just the 3 hours you spend with the conductor. You go home and just use that curiosity and say, who's Gene Perling? What did he do? Or what's A Clear Day all about? And use your curiosity to really explore what Andy was talking about.
Or even to use YouTube to say, what are other ways you could perform this piece? Mm-hmm. That curiosity, that was not available to me when I was a kid. So
and it seems like there are perhaps two different ways to think about music or even art as a whole, where one is perhaps a bit more concerned with correction and perfection, and another could be a little bit more concerned with play and exploration and curiosity. And I think perhaps neither is wrong, but I think just as an opinion of mine, or at least in my own experience, I have gotten so much more tied up in knots whenever I am 100% focused on correction and perfection. And I can say that with myself as an artist, but also as a teacher perhaps, because I've done some voice lessons and such. I have noticed so often that if you're just hounding and pounding at a very specific concept and trying to achieve correction and perfection, that perhaps it could be significantly more efficient even if we can just think a little bit more about exploration and play. I know, like Karl Orff did his whole thing about Orff's Schulwerk, and he said specifically about teaching children music that it is so much better to learn through play, because what we have learned, we will find, has become child's play.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Anybody else on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, coming in as a professional horn player, because I was like one of the, I show up and I have the notes and I do, and so coming into this group, that was the biggest learning curve, is to what's going on my face, you know, and like the, you know, language and diction. I mean, so I kind of knew this stuff because I had been singing with some really good groups, but nothing was Chanticleer. So I really, and I don't know if it was conscious or whatnot, but I would recommend to anybody, go back to the very beginning, what got you into music in the first place, and to reflect on it, you know, and because, you know, I'm realizing, like, I was really into Patsy Cline, so like, get into Patsy Cline again, you know, and that had helped me be a singer and not just a technician that comes in. Because I had gone through what, you know, Vinny was talking about on the horn, because the French horn is a very difficult instrument, and you really do have to focus on perfection, because you know, people know when, you know, the horn player misses the note. So, so, you know, in singing, I mean, that was such a freeing kind of child's play-like experience for me. And so that wasn't so the singing is kind of, for me, well, that's the easy part, but the hard, you know, for me, the challenging part is to then become a singer. And that's something that I will work on the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we're going to take us in a slightly different direction now, and I want us to talk about our voices, the actual instruments. And the first kind of line of thinking is for the countertenors in the group. Are we, like with all the altos and sopranos in the group, are we thinking about the term falsettists? Is that a term that we like or care about, or do we just say, I sing alto, I sing soprano? Like, how do you guys just, like, if you were to describe, yeah, I sing in this group and I sing really high notes. How do you describe that to a person who doesn't know the voice? And anybody, Cortez, why don't you?
Sometimes, I mean, you might make reference to like more familiar stuff like pop singers. People would talk about like Michael Jackson singing, you know, and his, I don't, the term falsetto doesn't offend me at all, because I particularly believe I'm using my falsetto.
Okay.
So I'm not bothered by it, you know. There are some people that are, you know, the connotations to that word, you know, sort of rub people the wrong way.
Okay.
But sometimes I'll use like common examples. Earth, Wind, and Fire, you know, this group where one of the guys is singing in the stratosphere, and I would say that's his falsetto. And so I would tell anyone who's unfamiliar, check this out, check that out. Yeah.
Okay. Any other countertenors wanted to hop in on that?
I mean, yeah, I mean, the easiest way to sort of have someone access it, and whether you're talking to people that you're in a master class or, you know, at a reception after a show, they're, oh, what is that? How do you access that? I'm like, well, speak up here. Ooh, scary, scary ghost. And they go, ooh, like, there you go, there it is. You know, and it's like any other muscle. You know, you strengthen it over time. You realize how you can stretch it and do different things with it, different timbres, and it's an exploration of trying to make it what you want it to do. So yeah, falsettos, I mean, that's fine with me too. Logan, you probably
Yeah, I was going to say, oftentimes, I think maybe stepping a little further ahead, maybe not just the people that don't know what a countertenor is, but I think maybe singers and such. Oftentimes, I think if you hear the word countertenor, people are like, great, you sing Bach and you sing Handel. You're an opera singer, right? You know? And me, I studied tenor in undergrad. So like that, I have no qualms with countertenor, but I think, you know, that's often, I think, where people's brains kind of go, oh, you sing the alto line in the church choir or something. What I think makes Chanticleer special in using falsettists or sopranists or, you know, countertenors, is that we have to find ways to make it timbrally speech-like. And that we're not all singing with always the proper choral tone and the, you know, these like big, you know, it's really rep specific too, but I think one of my favorite aspects of countertenors throughout the history of Chanticleer is that they're able to take the countertenor voice or the falsetto and make it sound so teethy and chesty and very honest and very part of the voice, you know, just like really, like, it's not just this like falsetto extension of, I don't know, hard to explain, but I think that that's one of the things I cherish about this, about singing countertenor, quote unquote, in Chanticleer is you're able to, like Corey said, find different sounds and ways to make chords tune, ways to make music more relatable, and yeah, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but there's even parts of just my head voice that I use for some countertenor singing, having studied tenor. It's like, Adam here next to me, he's got a real low alto voice, and that's the sort of stuff I just have to use in my head or chest. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask that a similar question too about that, because of course everyone's FOC is different, and where your passaggio happens is going to be different. Do any of the altos, for example, in the group feel like they're kind of living in their chest voice more than the others? Do we have to adjust that timbrely? So I just think about, I sing countertenor sometimes too in my group, only if we need it, but I'm singing with women, and I have to do all kinds of weird things that probably aren't healthy. And so is that part of the selection process of the group? Like, say, when we're auditioning a new member, like, it's got to fit with the timbre of the guys we have. Like, how does that work? Altos or sopranos, I guess.
I would say that we're looking for voices that are solid and people who have command over their instruments. And then from there, we will recreate Chanticleer. I mean, there are pillars, like say within our alto section, for instance. We want someone who can really like Adam, who has this really low and like just powerful quality in that instrument. But then on the other end, I'm in the alto section. I have some higher extension available, so we can sort of marry and blend into the soprano section. And so that's the sort of thing that we look for. We're just looking for instruments that are solid in what they can do and that will sort of bridge gaps in sections.
Okay.
I will say that we do move around a lot too. I think that we, and I've always found it interesting that countertenor is kind of such a blanket term. Like there's a FOC system for sopranos and everybody else, but like there's, even though all 6 countertenors in this group are very, very different, but there's no categorization of that.
There's no spinto countertenor.
Right. I know, even though
I'm like, Jesus.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I'm curious too, for the tenors and the baritones in the group, and you mentioned that you hop around a lot and that there might be some crossover. And I imagine in a group that's 12 and you're trying to sing music that's got Debussy all over the place, that there has to be a certain almost like divorcing of our identity of exactly what I am a tenor or I am an alto. If anyone would like to kind of weigh in on how those decisions are made, like I'm going to pop up and take this part, or you are, or is there a hierarchy already set and we already know who goes where? How does that work?
I think well before I joined, the structure was just, we sat in chairs. We were numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
I see.
Number 1 always sang the top line. Number 2 always sang the top line unless there was a second soprano line. Number 3 always sang the, soprano. If there was a split to the alto, that person would jump down to the top alto line. Number 12 bass would always sing low bass, and so it was rather mathematical, and you didn't stray too far away from that too much, I think. And then, things sort of shifted. Some of the countertenors, I think, as people got replaced, were like, well, I can't sing that high all the time, or I don't want to sing that low all the time. And so then we sort of got into the system where, okay, well, I'm going to give you a break so you get to go down there. Tim does make our part assignments. He says, you're going to sing this, this, and this, and if it's a complete, I know I can't possibly sing that, he is open to that, but, Andy Berry is always going to sing the low bass line. With Zach usually, but that's a given. And Logan is almost always going to sing the top soprano line because in most cases he's the only one who can sing that high all the time. But then in another piece, if we're doing TTBB rep, then things kind of get funny because then all the countertenors have to jump down, and so then we all kind of have to scramble. Oh, no, I want this part, I want this part. And some of the countertenors are really great at jumping down to baritone, and we had a guy, Alan, who used to drop to low bass as one of the altos who dropped to low bass. And so some of us and Corey actually sings really convincingly as a baritone. Not that any of you others don't, but but Cortez and I are sitting over here we studied countertenor our entire lives. We don't know how to sing like boys, and so it's sometimes a little, it's just we're singing our falsetto down here, but it's a lot more, it's a lot more collaborative in that regard as well. And sometimes, we try to put everybody on a part that fits his voice as best as possible, but sometimes there's one person that's left out in the cold who has to sing this part that's really just not great, and so you spend the whole song, glaring at everybody because you're like, I wanted to sing that part. But, those are very rare. But again, that's something that we sort of figure out in the early stages of putting a piece together. Tim has an idea of what he'd like. He knows our voices, has an idea of what he would like it to be. But if somebody says, what, this is not sustainable for an entire season for me to sing this part, then we discuss options. If it's changeable, we'll go at it. But sometimes it does feel like a free for all, I will say.
Well, and just talking about sustainability a little bit. This is sort of an anecdote, so I won't particularly take too much time about this, but my mom, when I first started having an interest in singing, I would sing for my mom, and every now and then she would stop me because she has some experience in singing, mainly Indian classical music, but she would say, that's your false voice, don't use your false voice. And I had no idea what she was talking about. And I would ask her to clarify, and God bless my mom, I love her so much, she is perhaps the worst person at clarifying. But I think just going through this musical journey that is my life and now includes Chanticleer, I think perhaps one of the biggest things about sustainability, and just speaking about countertenors and tenors and baritones and basses, is that truly the more that we sing, the more we realize what is our real voice. And the more, I think one of the biggest blessings in this group is perhaps, maybe there is a bit of ego death involved, and perhaps there is a little bit of, I have to sing in uncomfortable portions of my voice, but whenever we can really sing with our true and real voices, whatever that means to each and every one of us, I think that is where perhaps the magic happens.
Mm-hmm. Very well.
Yeah, that's really neat. And that kind of, you said ego death, one of my favorite terms. And I wonder too if the collaborative nature and all of the switching of the voices and discovering your real voice, all the things that you guys get to experience, does that ever present a challenge as you also come to the group trying to find interpersonally, what does it mean to take feedback from a colleague? What does it mean to be told, well, the thing you thought was right was not what we need? Does that something you wrestle with when you come to the group? Something you get used to over time? How does that work?
Well, I'll speak from personal experience. I wrestle with it. I struggle with ego death a bit because I came to this group as a really strong choral singer. This is what I do. I know how to do this. This is how I do it. This is how it should be. Obviously, that's not correct. That's not how I should be thinking. But sometimes it's hard for me to take notes sometimes. But it's always, in this group, like we have said, it's very collaborative, and it's a group of 12 really, really talented musicians, and no one ever in this group is ever trying to personally attack anyone. And that's something that because singing is so personal, the first instinct for someone like me is well, no, wait a minute. You're telling me I was wrong? Or you're telling me that wasn't pretty? But, but it's important to, remember that we all are in this group because we want a really great magical music experience.
Yeah, feedback is how we all grow. No one in any moment is intentionally doing something wrong or wanting to do something that's aesthetically unpleasing. And so we all have to humble ourselves and know that no one is trying to attack you. I'm sensitive about receiving comments.
Me too.
And so I just prepare myself, and I might have a look on my face oh, okay, fine, all right, I can take that, and you just have to filter things, just understand, okay, well, in this context, maybe that wasn't the best thing, that wasn't the best choice, so, yeah.
And I'm seeing a lot of nods around the circle as we kind of voice that. Would you say that these collaborative feedback moments are they part of the culture of the group? Are they rare? That somebody would look at another singer and say, would you try to do this instead of this?
I think they're definitely a part of the culture of the group. It's easy to take for granted almost, spending some time in the group, how much we give each other feedback, because I do remember coming into the group from opera, for example, being shocked to receive a note from another singer, like as if another singer would give a note in opera to somebody else, or in a conducted ensemble. I imagine a lot of the time you're standing next to somebody, you can't stand how wide their vibrato is or whatever, but you would never turn to them in your community chorus and say, you know, hey, could you tone that down? It doesn't happen. And so for this group, you know, certainly there is that aspect of family where you have to learn how other people receive feedback, and when giving somebody some kind of feedback might get a worse performance out of them actually than giving the note in the moment. But it is certainly the only way for us to improve in particular, because we don't have necessarily our music director listening to us all the time or an outside ear all the time. And there's a lot that person can miss, even if they are listening all the time, that you can only hear kind of inside the arc, we might say. And so it is a necessity, I guess, for us to give each other that kind of feedback.
Like the biggest part of feedback for me is like asking permission to give the feedback, because you want to make sure that that person is in a place to receive it, and to be specific. You know, a general positive thing, sure, it's encouraging, it's nice to hear, but a general negative thing, like that's the worst thing you could tell me. So like something very specific or like positively specific is also really good, because feedback, you know, it goes both ways.
Yeah. Your flat is a lot different than that G natural was flat at measure 22.
Exactly.
That's a totally different
Or,
feedback.
you know, like sometimes saying you're flat, you know, it's like, it's not about being flat, it's a vowel issue or something, you know, and some folks you need to know, like, well, if you tell somebody they're flat or sharp, you know, then it might, you know, they're
going to do the other thing.
It could be overcompensated, and then now they go the other way, and so like, what is really the issue? And sometimes it's not so cut and dry as flat, sharp, fast, slow. There's so much more to music than just that, and to have the wisdom to, you know each other well enough to say the thing that needs to be said. And over the course of, you know, these 16 years, that the culture has changed with regard to collaboration. When Cortez and I got into the group, I think it was pretty ruthless in how we would address each other, and it was just, you know, Joe Jennings would kind of sit back and let us all fight like dogs. I mean, it was like Lord of the Flies sometimes. But I mean, it was exciting, and I think you know, with that group of people, it did yield a pretty solid product on stage. And, you know, different directorship over time, you know, kind of shifted that culture a little bit, you know, and sometimes, you know, they want to take a little more ownership over what's going on, or sometimes the leadership doesn't allow us to do that. But, you know, now we're getting back into it, and, you know, Tim's been our music director for 2 years now, and we're learning kind of how to do that again with this group of people. And this group of people is a different group of people than when I joined. So it's, you know, I'm not gonna, you know, like Alan or something, you know, like smack him across the face and, you know, there's no, you know, so it's just a different, you know, you gotta feel the vibe sometimes. I'm still learning that.
I think feedback works when there's trust. So, you know, any of our voice leaders, if they say, "Oh, Matt, like that's not working," I'll go, "Oh, yes, wise one," and you just trust them, because, and it's never like, you never made them feel like you're insufficient or any kind of ego death, because you know they have the best interest. And so when we have built that trust between each other, I can say to Cortez, "Girl, man, that's not working." He'll go, "I know." He goes, "I know." As opposed to if he didn't trust me, he'd just give me that look. And but also with feedback, you have to remember is that feedback, as Jack was saying, is not just constructive criticisms. It's just positivity and encouragement, turning to Bradley and saying, "You sound amazing, by the way." Like,
Bradley does sound
amazing. Pointing out specific moments, or turning to Andy Berry, like I could feel your resonance in your chest, just like rocking my body. Good job. And I think when you build those, like when you build that, and it's not what's the P word? P word. Flattery. No, P. PH. No, anyway, yeah, it's not just, I'm not filigree. Platitude. It's not a platitude.
What a great word.
It's not a.
I don't know that one.
It has a beak.
But also
No, but no, it's not a platitude. It's like very sincere comments, and when you remember to compliment your colleagues, then that trust gets built. Because if all you're ever feeling is negative feedback, then of course you're going to be protective of yourself and be defensive.
It's good to ask for it too. I mean, not only do we give it to each other, but a lot of these guys have asked for the feedback too, which I think is admirable. It's like, hey, does this sound as shrill to you as I think it is from me? And oftentimes like, yeah, it's a little bright. But yeah,
That's important because that's also partly how the cultures get built. Like if you open yourself up to that, that's incredible.
It's really important to also just kind of remember that, everyone in this room is extremely passionate and wants the best product. And I think that might just be important to remind yourself if you're feeling insecure in a moment when someone's like giving you some feedback, It's just, we want to make it the best that it can be, so.
Okay, one more topic, and we're going to wrap this up. And I would love to hear from everybody if you can come up with like a thought about this. So we've already talked about the culture. We've talked about the rigor of the performance schedule in that you get to do, I heard during the master class there was kind of a before COVID rigor of performance schedule, and then there's now, and I imagine it'll work its way back to that someday. Yes, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
But with all of those things together, it's still, compared to most of us, like I said, who do choral music, you're doing the same music with the same people over and over and over and over. What are the ways that you think about individually avoiding the burnout on the music itself, but also the burnout of just the people and being in the group, and like, does it ever be like, oh, I wish I could try something else, that kind of thing? Like, how do we think about that? Feel free to jump in.
One of the things for me, why I love Chanticleer, I'm sorry you have to hear this all again, but is not only do we sing the same music, but we sing it in different venues.
And for different people.
And for different people. So the audience is a variable and the venue is variable. And those two things can shed a lot of light on how you might appreciate or hate the music even more. But most of the time, you get into the Musikverein in Vienna, and you've been singing the same Palestrina motet 60 times, and you get in there and it just makes sense. Or a big cathedral, right? And there's a 10-second reverb, and the music the soundscape is so different, and it captures you, it overwhelms you to the point where you might break down on stage. And or sometimes it's not uncommon to see a tear while someone's singing. You see a tear coming down, and those are the moments that you don't get, if you're a pickup group singing 6 concerts in 4 days at the same church. And so that's something I really love. And the audience and our past music director Fred Scott used to always say, you don't know the people that are in the audience. It could be their first time hearing Chanticleer or their last time hearing Chanticleer. And that's always stuck with me too. It's like, you can't take that for granted. Music is so alive and so important and so influential in so many different ways to the human soul. And to know that could be that last person's chance to hear a motet, beautifully sung by us, or is the amazing thing about this job.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I can say, burnout is a real thing in any job, right? In this job, this was my dream job. This is my dream job. Hopefully I'm still doing it for a long time. But right before COVID, there was a particular stretch of like 3 months where we were just go, 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 go. And I was done, man. I was ready for this to be my last year. That was about 3 years ago. And then, at the time, COVID hit, and we were like, oh, God, we get a week or 2 off. And then, we got 2 years where we're still struggling. But my point is just that, I want to be doing this job for a long time. Now, where I am now, at 30 years old. But when I was 27, 3 years ago, I was thinking, well, maybe what's next? It doesn't, it changes over time. And I think that's what's been really special about this particular group of people is we've had a lot less turnaround as of late. and it's really nice to be able to sing with the same people, and you don't have to incorporate 3 new singers. Like when I joined, we had 3 new singers at a time. I can't imagine for the 9 guys how annoying that was. It's like, chop chop, get on board. It's much easier when there's only one person that everyone kind of gets to, like, oh, it'll be great, but.
There are so many things in life that are inconsistent. And the most consistent aspect is change. And in today's society and all across the world, and even here in America, like, it's hard just to make it through the week. You know what I mean? Both through news. I mean, people are living paycheck to paycheck. People are having their own existential crises in their lives and seeing their dreams fall away or not come to fruition. And the one thing that humbles me every time is that, like, I'm able to experience spiritual and philosophical kind of growth and, like, reflection because the thing that I love the most is the thing that is stable, is the thing that is keeping me afloat, and the thing that helps me pay, not only just pay the bills, but, like, keep my head straight sometimes. And when you know, it's like we talk about ego death. It's like I try and quote unquote die daily, you know, in the morning and at the night before you go to sleep. Because when you wake up and you go, I get paid to sing songs today and think about what it means to be alive. And the text in this music that I'm singing is reminding me what it means to be alive. And I have 12 other dudes, our music director included, that not only shape me musically, and we talk about that so much, but that shape me as men. And the men that have come before that I've worked with, Eric Alatorre, Alan Reinhardt, you know, like Chris Albanese, all these other guys, like Marcus Terrell Ruff, like, they've all impacted me in a way that still carries on today as a person, as a spiritual being, not just a musician. And I think that when you feel burnt out and you remind yourself of that, and that direct deposit hits, you're like, real. You know, it's those two things. It's easy for people to take for granted that it's hard to have spiritual, philosophical, existential reflection and growth when they're just worried about their needs being met. And we're able to do that with what we love. So
that's great. That's a very choralosophy answer. I like that. So we've kind of had, and I want to hear from some other thoughts too on this, because especially those guys maybe who have been in the group a long time, we've talked about how everything changes, things fluctuate. Has there been, you know, maybe Cortez or Adam, kind of the old guys in the group? If I they are cultured.
This interview is over.
They're like red wines.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, no, just of course, meaning that, like, have either of you or anyone can answer this question really, but had those, like, kind of low stretches where there was, maybe this is not what I enjoy doing. Has anybody come through that? Feels comfortable sharing?
I mean, I would say I honestly haven't had, like, low stretches here. I will say outside influences have kind of gotten into my head, in the fact that I've been in this group 16 years. I get a lot of questions. Oh, is he going to leave now? What are you going to do next? And, you know, and that sort of creeps in my head, and I shouldn't be worried about what anyone else thinks about what I'm doing with my life. I grew up singing in choirs, and this has been a phenomenal experience for me, and I think that it will continue to be. You know, I mean, I meet so many different new people coming into the group. That's always an exciting thing, but at the same time, you lose a friend that you've made such a connection with when personnel changes. But that's one of the things that also sort of just makes this thing fresh. Repertoire changes, then something will come back, and I'm like, well, I don't want to sing that again. But then the soloist to say whatever piece that is, and just like, oh my God, now that is fantastic for him. And then it's like, oh, I love the piece again. So it's all those things that kind of keep me here, and direct depositing. That's real.
That's great.
Yeah. I think, you know, I've had low periods of time, you know, and probably at the time didn't really know how low I was, you know, but, you know, I never ever, like, thought, oh, well, it was, you know, if I thought like, oh, this job is really getting difficult for me, you know, it still was something like I knew that it was not something I was easily going to give up. And I'm glad that now I'm in a place, I mean, for all sorts of reasons, you know, that I could do another 17 years, it feels like. But I think, you know, artistically speaking, and I'll say it again, that what keeps me excited about this job is that music and singing is something you can be so passionate about. And I have been, you know, getting into all sorts of new artists and singers, and some nights, you know, like, oh, I'm going to go on stage and I'm going to be Tanya Tucker. And, you know, it doesn't mean that I'm going to be singing Renaissance music like Tanya Tucker would, you know, but I can embody the spirit of a great performer. And it, you know, just that in and of itself. And then, you know, and then what comes out of me is, you know, the stuff that we've rehearsed, you know, but I can, in my mind, you know, I'm Jamie Fricke, I'm Patsy Cline. You know, and let's take a moment to reflect on Loretta Lynn, who passed away today. I know that her and Patsy are singing some beautiful music right now, but, you know, being passionate about music and hearkening back to what got you into it in the first place will, for me, I think will keep me excited about it until I die.
Yeah, wow.
I'd say, just to speak on like the lows of tour, we're away from our loved ones, our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, our sisters, our friends that are having children. We're missing weddings, we're missing funerals, we're missing people grow, you know, your hometown is changing, you know, and that can be sometimes, I think, a little scary or hard, because you're living your best life, you know, but you're thinking like, you know, if I didn't have these singers and, you know, this organization, like, I have missed on so much, and there's so many people that I've struggled to keep up with, you know, and even call, you know, once a month, if a few times a year, you know, and so that can be a difficult thing, but that's when you really try and, again, lean into your brothers, and you lean into the rep, and you just, like Adam keeps saying, you gotta remember why you're doing this. You know, there's this trend on TikTok that's blowing up that was just like people like complaining about some aspect of their job, you know, like, oh, I can't believe I got to mix all this music for this band, or I got to worry about my nursery, and then it flashes to a picture of them as a little kid like doing that thing they love, like, wait, we made a career out of this? And you got to revisit that to keep yourself chugging along.
Yeah. It's interesting. I even before I was a podcaster, as my side job, I've been asking people nosy questions my whole life. So this is actually really, really good. When Chanticleer came through my town in 2012 and did a master class with my kids, and I got a chance to ask Eric Alatorre. So I said, "What's the hardest thing about being in Chanticleer?" That's exactly what he said. Just I'm missing everything. Like, I'm missing all my family's stuff. And I think for me, when I was growing up as a singer and would have ever thought about being in a group like this, that was always the thing that I just didn't know if I could do that. Like that's so. I mean, it's almost like you get to experience all of these things, but that at a cost at some points too. That's a really interesting thing to think about. Anybody else? Last thoughts on burnout?
Well, yeah, I also just want to say we haven't talked very much about what happens when we don't get along with each other, because it's not always sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. And it's not even about the musical stuff. Sometimes, I mean, we spend so much time with each other, and we're very vulnerable with each other, that when we have little tiffs or spats here and there, I think they feel so much more personal, because we're with each other all the time. And if you have a fight with somebody or you have a disagreement, you still have to perform with that person. And the people in the audience can't see that dissension between you two. Otherwise, the performance for all of us suffers. And there have been times when, you know, I think any one of us can talk about when we have felt isolated from the group for whatever reason, and we don't feel like we have, you know, anybody in our corner, and I can't even talk to my colleagues about what I'm feeling because they're the people that are making me feel this way. And that's a hard thing to deal with too. And then you usually talk about it with someone, they're like, why are you being so stupid? That's not the case at all. I mean, it's amazing how we can kind of get caught up in our own echo chambers and feel feelings that, I mean, are not feelings, but like we are perceiving things that are not always apparent. But sometimes we do fight, sometimes we disagree, and we just have to figure out a way to get over it and remember, go back to the basics of why we are in this ensemble. Like, we get to make high quality music with each other on a nightly basis. I think for the first 4 years in this ensemble, I didn't get along with Adam Ward. And now we get along just fine.
Like,
I don't know why.
it's like, well, we just didn't like hang out or like what, and there's just so it and. I
for no reason.
At some point, we just had to be like, hey, you know what? There's nothing wrong. It's like let's just be
here.
Let's
together.
just exist. But it was something like, sometimes you just like there are just people that come in and they'll somebody will find a click or whatever, and it's like end up getting to know one of your colleagues as well as you do the others, and so. Things can kind of just fester and for no good reason, and so I think it's good to just like let it go. And
it sounds like you're describing how a lot of families function.
Mm-hmm. Well,
because you can't, like when it's family, you can't just have the argument and then bolt. Like you're going to be brothers tomorrow, and like you said, you're going to have to sing this concert together 3 days from now. So you can't just walk away. Right. And so in a lot of ways, it forces that type of dynamic. That's interesting.
Yep.
That's good. That's great. This has been awesome, guys. I really, really appreciate you opening up and speaking to the choir world and letting me ask my nosy questions. And I really, really appreciate it. So we'll wrap up, and I guess you guys get to go get dinner.
Oh, yeah. Something like that.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of a conversation. That was, of course, a little longer because there were a lot of people to try to get in their thoughts and in their opinions on that episode, and I appreciate those of you who stuck around to hear them out. As always, on the way out, don't forget to use your Choralosophy checkout code at all of the sponsors' websites, mymusicfolders.com, Sight Reading Factory, Graphite Publishing, RyanMain.com, and then, of course, go to Patreon and sign up there. That's a big deal. Patreon.com/Choralosophy, and sign up for as little as $3 a month. And then, of course, there is the recurring need for liking, sharing, commenting, being part of the conversation on social media. Ultimately, the whole mission of this show is to start conversations and get us talking again as colleagues. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.